Hello class, in this video demo I'm going to be teaching you how to make these little leaf key rings. Now leaves are a little bit more technically advanced. They involve a technique called shouldering, which you will see later in this video. We're also going to be working on drawing out small pieces of steel very thin and scrolling them into a ring like this. So let's get into it.
So the first step to making a leaf is you're going to take your piece of round bar and you're going to start making it square. We've done this many times. I'm sure you're starting to get sick of it, but it is a crucial part of making many projects. Now you'll notice here I'm using rebar, whereas you're using some smaller gauge round stock. And the only reason for that is I wanted to make sure that the demo piece was big enough that you could really see what was going on while I was hammering on it. So, like I said, you're just going to establish a square, and then once you have your square established, you're going to go in to start making a taper. Now, in previous labs, we've had you make a pretty shallow taper so that you can make S-hooks or bracelets, things like that. For a leaf, you actually want a very steep taper. And as you can see, I am establishing a very steep angle on this, and I'm bringing it pretty aggressively down to a point, because we want to make sure that we are not sacrificing too much of our width in exchange for length. And these tips don't have to be terribly sharp. I probably could have ended here, but I decided to pull that taper back just a little bit more. And here we are going to go into that technique that I called shouldering. What you're going to do is hang your piece half on and half off the anvil, and then strike directly down as if you're hammering on the corner of the anvil. And that'll create this little indentation that we call a shoulder. And it's a great way to separate one piece of the project from the other. This is a technique that you also will use if you're ever trying to make a pair of tongs. As you can see, that sections it off quite nicely at an angle. And again, this only works if the face of your hammer is half on and half off. Otherwise, you would only be flattening the part that's on the anvil, or you'd be messing up your head. And as you can see, I got that shouldered pretty aggressively. And now what I'm doing is I'm setting the corners up on the face of the anvil and hammering those down, like how I've told you to do if you need to fix your square, if your square is getting a little bit slanted to one side. And that's just so that I can make the neck of the leaf a little bit rounder. That would matter more if you were making a stem. For this, I'm just going to make the head of the leaf. So once you have your stem rounded, you're going to set it upside down, 180 degrees from where you were hammering it, and at a slight angle, you're going to start hitting the belly of that in. The reason you want that angle on there is to avoid any cold shuts forming, and here I'm just cleaning up this transition area a little bit better using the peen of my hammer. And speaking of the peen of the hammer, this is the project where we're really going to start using it, because we want to draw out this leaf sideways rather than lengthwise. So right here I'm just flattening it, and then on the next heat I believe I'm going to switch to the peen, and I'm going to start in the center, and I'm going to just hammer on either side of that middle line. What that is going to do is going to draw out the cheeks of the leaf so that it gets wider instead of longer. And so now what we are going to do is put in some fullers to be like the veins of the leaf. And here I'm not sure if you can see it, but I have another person helping me. So I am holding the fuller, which is that device that's being held in the tongs and being used to make those indentations, and I'm holding the workpiece. There's another person on the other side of the anvil who's actually hitting the fuller for me. As you can see, it just adds some of those ribs. And then we're going to go through and do the exact same thing to the other side, hopefully matching up the number of fullers. And so it's kind of hard to see at this angle, but I am angling that fuller just slightly so that I'm only hitting on the workpiece. I don't want to hit the face of the anvil with this fuller, because it would mess up the anvil face and it would mess up the fuller. But that is about what it looks like when the leaf is almost all the way completed. So now we're going to go in and you can see I'm switching to the same type of stock that you're using. Just because I want to show you how we're actually making the stems. And you'll notice right now I'm drawing this out using just the face of the hammer, which is fine. That's how we've been teaching you to do it. There is a way that is a little bit faster, and it's if you actually hold your hammer at a slight angle and hit with the corner of the hammer. That concentrates more force through less area, and so it takes less force to move more of the material. And right here I'm going to show you how that looks when you're doing it. It may look really rough because I'm leaving all those marks in there, but don't worry, after I get it drawn out enough, I'm going to go back with the face of my hammer and I'm going to smooth out all of those regions. And you may notice I'm only striking on 2 faces of this. That's because I want to hang the head of the leaf off of the anvil so that I'm at no risk of damaging it. Once I have it drawn out in that direction, I'm just going to go over to the opposite side of the anvil, and I'm just breaking this off by shouldering it down to a very small point that'll be easy to snap with another pair of tongs. You'll see this is exactly the same as shouldering. It's just on the near side of the anvil instead of the far side. And then I'm just going to use some tongs to work it back and forth until it snaps. And after that, it's just more drawing out. Now, since we are making little key rings, we want to make sure that our tapers are as narrow and as even and needle-like as possible. So you can see we're just getting it all worked out. I believe I get a little bit flatter in one dimension than the other here, which makes it a little bit difficult to forge, but I work through it. We're just going to round that out the same way that I've taught you guys to round out things for your S-hooks. And then I went ahead and flattened the heads of the leaves the same way that I did with the rebar. Now I'm going to take this hardy tool called a mandrel, which is basically a cone that slots into the square hole in your anvil, and I'm going to use that along with a pair of pliers to wrap the ring of the key ring around. Going to bend it forwards and then right around. It should move pretty easily when it's this thin, as well as long as you keep it hot. We're just going to bend that down, pinch it together, and then I'm going to go in with a wooden hammer just to clean up all of the little jagged edges. Then we're going to go back down to the face of the anvil, and we're just going to use a pair of tongs and a pair of pliers to bend that leaf into shape. And I'm going to go in with the wooden hammer again just to knock it down a little bit. I think that's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. And here's what it should look like when it's done. I was running the forge a little bit oxygen rich, which is why all that scale is on there. But now you know how to make one of these key rings.